So, single-channel crossing male asylum seekers will be sent 4,500 miles away to Rwanda for offshore processing as part of a new deal to help tackle the channel migrant crisis.
Yes, the scheme is targeting single men as they apparently make up the majority of the 28,300 people who have crossed the channel last year. Those sent to Rwanda will be encouraged to settle there instead of in the UK while their visas are being processed. But will they? According to asylum statistics released by the House of Commons Library, 760 Rwandans themselves applied for asylum in the UK last year. Interesting. Furthermore, Labour and some charities are calling the scheme unethical and unworkable, whereas the Prime Minister says it will save countless lives.
Yeah, we had a chap called Mike Tapp on earlier, didn't we, who's a military expert, I suppose, and he was quite damning of this particular scheme. He said that, he thought it was drawn up on the back of a fag packet, really, that it wouldn't work. It was inhumane.
He also expressed some security concerns, he thought, as well. About
yeah, absolutely. And his view, anyway, on it as well, one of his views on it, was that, when it comes to things like the housing of these people, that actually that's the failure of a Conservative government for not providing enough housing. Lots of you in the inbox did not agree with Mike Tapp. But joining us now is Lee Anderson, Conservative MP for Ashfield and a member of the Home Affairs Select Committee. Thank you very, very much. Great to have you on the show, Lee. OK, all right, first things first, is this a good scheme and is it going to work?
Well, it's a great scheme, Patrick. This has been a long time in the making. It's something that me and fellow Red Wall colleagues in particular have campaigned on for the past 2 years, really, since this became a real problem in our country. And this new scheme actually shows what a compassionate country we are. I think we're the only country in Europe, I know Denmark's talking about it, we've actually got the wheels in motion now. We're going to transfer, like you say, probably young men. That's because they make up most of the illegal crossers at the moment, to Rwanda, to a safe place where they can claim asylum in Rwanda. Let's remember that Rwanda is a good country, it's a developing country, and I'm sure the immigrants can have a wonderful life there. It's great news.
And so why is it Rwanda's responsibility, or any African country for that matter, to take responsibility for people that are attempting to come to the UK?
Well, this is a world problem, this is, Anaya, so it needs a world solution. Now, we can't take every single...
But why should it be Rwanda's responsibility, do you think? Why should it be an African country?
Well, Rwanda have kindly agreed to, they've signed this agreement with the UK, so they stepped forward, they've stepped up, they're taking their responsibility. I think it's a good thing. Rwanda, like I said, it is a developing country. They welcome immigrants. They've got a brilliant track record with asylum seekers and immigration, so why not? Why shouldn't it be Rwanda? Why should we down talk a country in Africa that's prepared to step forward and help out with this world crisis?
Lee, I don't think it's down to, talking down. I just think many people are asking why other countries should bear responsibility for what is our own issues. I mean, for example, many of the people that apply for asylum are from Albania, for example. That's a European country. So I'll be saying that Albanian people who may take this route will be sent to another continent.
Well, I've got good news for anybody coming from Albania or any other country. They can claim asylum in France or Germany or Belgium or Holland or Spain. Any of these countries, they can claim asylum. They don't have to risk their lives making a treacherous journey across the busiest shipping lane in the world to come to the UK. They can claim asylum in any of these countries. So that's really a non-argument.
Well, and also, we had that chap on earlier, Mike Tapp, and he was going on about, look at how compassionate all these other countries are. Look at what they've got in place. Well, I mean, a lot of people have passed through those countries in order to get on that dinghy and get into this country. So I don't quite understand how that works, frankly. Presumably, Lee, what the real big hope here is that this actually is a massive deterrent. And so actually, we don't end up having to send huge numbers of people to Rwanda. It just stops them coming in the first place. Is that right?
Well, that's exactly the point, Patrick. Look, if you're a single male in your 20s, you paid $4 or $5 grand to jump on a dinghy to come to the UK, and then you're quickly flown off to Rwanda for a life in Rwanda. You're going to be not making TikTok videos anymore. Sending videos to your friends saying what a great life it is in this four-star hotel. They'll probably send a video to the mate saying don't bother coming because you'll end up in Africa.
Yeah, but I think some people would question your kind of characterisation of some of those individuals. Undoubtedly, the majority of them are young men, but we do know that many of them are from Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan. These are hardly, countries that are thriving right now. I think not just because they're single young men doesn't mean that they are not genuine refugees.
Listen, Anaya, if they're genuine refugees fleeing persecution, I'll tell you this, I can guarantee you this, I'll have a £20 bet with you. There's no war in France at the moment. There's no war in Germany. There's no war in Spain. There's no war in Italy. There's one in the Ukraine, by the way, which we are embracing this. We are welcoming genuine asylum seekers.
Why don't we send them back to France?
I've got one moving next door to me, by the way.
Well, why don't we send them back to France, though, then? Why send them to another continent? If they're going through various different countries, why is our relationship with France not effective enough for them to process?
If I had my way, I've asked this question many, many times, why don't we just take them straight back to France, have a bit of a standoff with them? But, our country won't do that because that's breaking international law. Once they get halfway, they're entitled to come, they can claim asylum, they're being ferried in. It infuriates my constituents, it infuriates me. This is a kind way to deal with this immigration problem we've got at the moment. We cannot sit by day in, day out,
Oh, he's frozen. I didn't even have a chance to compliment him on what a cracking suntan he's got.
No, I think there's many fair points raised there.
On both sides, actually.
And I think, the problem is France has not necessarily been ideal when it comes to dealing with these issues. Or sometimes they have allowed boats to cross the barrier in order for it to get to the UK, and that is exacerbating the problem. And I think different countries are doing what they think is politically, convenient. Yeah,
I get that. By the way, that was Lee Anderson, Conservative MP for Ashfield. There was some interesting points, and again, look, I did raise the point earlier on, didn't I? I was quite disappointed in some elements of the media yesterday about focusing on Partygate at that particular time, and there's disagreement on that. But one of the things that I'm yet to really find huge amounts of answers for, and I was going to ask Lee about it, unfortunately his connection went, but was about the drivers of these boats, I suppose, the pilots of the boats, whatever you call them, they are now potentially going to serve life in prison, right? If they land over here. Well, a lot of time, those are the people who are just someone on that boat. So they're not the people smugglers. This idea that the people smugglers are dropping these people off and heading back, that's not the case. I thought that was quite interesting, actually, but we'll have to drill down on that another time because we're going to go over the way to Australia now. I believe so. Australia famously has had an offshore processing scheme in place since 2013 as part of former Prime Minister Tony Abbott's plan to stop the boats arriving in Australia illegally.
So, did it work? And will it work here? Here to shed some light on this is Caelan Bond, columnist at the Herald Sun and the Adelaide Advertiser. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, Caleb. I just wanted to clarify something, that the offshore processing centre that Australia operates, that is part of Australian territory. Correct me if I'm wrong, is it another country's territory or is it part of Australia's territory?
Well, we've had offshore processing on Papua New Guinea and Nauru, and so they don't actually belong to Australia. We've had deals with nations off the border of Australia. We hit a hitch in 2016, I believe it was, with Papua New Guinea when one of their courts ruled that one of the centres we had there was illegal. But there are still people held on Papua New Guinea, and they were indeed offered permanent residency of Papua New Guinea if they wanted to stay there. So we now have people on Christmas Island, which is a territory of Australia, but the majority of our offshore processing was done in Papua New Guinea and Nauru, which is not a country of our own. It's quite similar to this deal with Rwanda, where it would be, these people would be taken to another country and processed there, and if they're given permanent residency there, well, that's great.
And it worked, I suppose. Well, it did, didn't it?
It certainly did work. I mean, the reason this started, and in fact, it started just prior to Tony Abbott being elected in 2013, the Labor government, the outgoing Labor government, which was then under the control of Kevin Rudd, who was, for those who are up to date with their Australian politics, was elected Prime Minister in 2007 and was then deposed by Julia Gillard and came back before the 2013 election. They knew going into that election that the borders were a hot button issue. And they said very clearly that if you come to Australia, the Labor Party said, if you come to Australia on a boat, you will not be settled here. So it started in about August 2012 and it continued under the Abbott government and it continues to this day. The reason they did that... Sorry, yes. Go ahead. Sorry.
It's fantastic. It's just, we're a bit pressed for time, so I just want to get you on one thing, if that's right, and that's the cost. Because this is, as you said there, a hot button issue as well, isn't it? Because we're paying about £5 million a day for asylum seekers in hotels. That's just one element of the asylum seeker cost. A lot of uproar about the amount of money it might be costing us, 120 million quid to send over to Rwanda, etc. Has the Australian policy cost more or less money?
To be honest, I couldn't tell you, and I think that's probably a good sign because it's not something that's come across my desk or anyone else's desk because it hasn't been an issue. I mean, it doesn't matter what you do; it's going to cost you some money. Whether you settle them in your own country or another country, you're going to have to pay for it at some point. The point is that it has to be a deterrent. We did it here because in the space of about 3 years, more than 600 people died at sea trying to come to Australia on boats illegally. We stopped the boats, we put in offshore detention. We then turned around boats that came towards Australia and sent them back to where they came from, and it stopped almost overnight. I think we've had 1 or 2 boats illegally reach Australian shores in the last decade or so. It's a policy that has worked extremely effectively here. It stopped the deaths, and it stemmed the flow of the boats.
Just one quick final question. Papua New Guinea and some of the territories that you mentioned that are not necessarily under Australia's control, they are right next to Australia. You know, the Rwanda is thousands and thousands of miles away from the UK. Isn't that quite a significant difference in terms of being able to oversee what's going on, to be able to manage what's going on, when the proximity between Britain and Rwanda is completely different to what is effectively right next to Australia, which is Papua New Guinea?
Well, I don't know that it is. I mean, the reason that we had deals with Papua New Guinea and Nauru is because we already have working relationships with them, and so that was probably the easiest course of action for us to take. But I mean, Britain can station people in Rwanda just as easily as we can station people in Papua New Guinea. You're only a plane flight away. I can't see how the distance would create any trouble in terms of oversight. You get the right people involved, you have them there to watch over it. I can't see how there would be any difference. The fact that it's further away is neither here nor there.
Caleb, thank you very much. As always, Caleb Bond, columnist at the Herald Sun and the Adelaide Advertiser. Great to have you on the show.